Aaron Shaver.
Well, hello there, big fella.
How are things going up north? Is it snowing yet? I think is the question on sort of south of the Michigan border. That's what the question is on all of our minds. Have you had your first flakes of the white stuff yet?
Yeah, it snowed yesterday. Why don't you shut up about it?
Seriously?
Yeah, it was 29 degrees yesterday, dude. Why do you think I have like a parka on while I'm sitting in my house with the fire going over here?
I'm sorry. I was trying to be kitschy, but it's
yeah, it's been a minute since I've seen you.
It has been a minute. I think we both separately have been heads down on.
I'm making some pretty sweet non-security stuff. I don't know if people believe that, but sometimes I do things that aren't in security.
I believe it. I know that you're a man of many talents, but that's probably one for another.
I have an exciting project someday. I'll tell everyone about.
Okay, I can't wait. With bated breath here, I eagerly await those, being regaled with those stories. So we're talking. This has been on our list to talk about for a little while. We're talking about SIEM, SOC, and SOAR today. Three acronyms starting with S that kind of sort of relate to similar things. And I told you that
I feel like you need to make a triad.
Yeah, there are so many triads. That SIEM-SOC-SOAR triad, or the new SOC triad is another. There are no shortage of triad. There probably already is a triad for SIEM-SOC-SOAR. I think it's kind of I think there are some people that are adding XDR as a what's a four.
I don't know that you can add XDR. I don't know that XDR is a different thing, man.
Well, we'll start that argument. Yeah, it sounds like we're already into the content. But anyway, that's what we're talking about today: SIEM-SOC-SOAR, and kind of the ongoing and current evolution of security detection and response processes and technologies, and stuff and feelings. And okay, here we go. Okay. And so this is one I'm often, if not always, the defender of, not the status quo, but I'm trying to be the guy, like, guys, like, Aaron, don't pick on us. Like, this is just how it works. You don't get it. You haven't worked.
I'm just picking on you from a place of ignorance, and I think everyone knows that. So
yeah, I'm the defender of, like, well, things are tough in securing companies. You don't get it. You don't understand.
You're my feelings.
This is one maybe like our "Do You Need a CISO" episode. I feel like maybe I have to apologize in advance on this one, because I should defend the history of how we've processed, how we've evolved through these SIEM-SOC-SOAR topics, but I feel in advance like my heart's not going to be in it today, because, I've kind of arrived at a set of conclusions. I think that most companies, most organizations who've been trying to do some of these things shouldn't be trying to do these things. They should be approaching it different ways. But so let's dig in. And
so to those of us Earth dwellers, can you just explain those acronyms real quick for us?
I can't. You have to be indoctrinated in the.
If you don't know the acronym, please leave our YouTube channel.
You have no business practicing security. Yeah. So SIEM, and this is another thing. I'm going to get it. This is.
You're going to date yourself here, aren't you?
Yeah, I know.
Well, you're going to explain how it used to be SIEM, and then they added.
Yeah, I'm not going to do the SIEM,
okay.
All that. That's a history podcast more than a cybersecurity podcast. But I'll say I'm pointing out there are some differences of opinion of, is it pronounced SIM or SIEM? I've heard some people say, I don't like those people. But is security, incident, and event management. And this has been around a long time. I think I was looking at purchasing my first SIM platform. I wanted one of those probably 20 years ago. And so, that those technologies have been around a long time. And SIM is just, it's event collection and hopefully some correlation. I'm collecting these events like logs for, system admins. I'm collecting activity logs from technology inside of my organization. I'm pulling it together in a central location, and hopefully I'm doing something with that. I'm correlating, I'm analyzing, I'm even better, I'm identifying some badness, things that are unexpected, things that look bad, and so that I can do something about it. And as I said, you go back to companies like ArcSight, RSA NetWitness. I mean, there have just been, I could throw out a bunch of old product names beyond that too. But that stuff's been all around a long time. And then, SOC, or Security Operations Center, very often, there's some different approaches to that, but only in the largest organizations can you put together a SOC, but a SOC would be a team of people who are responsible for the care and feeding of that beast called the SIM, and, kind of the tools and processes around it. And I'll, talk a little more about that. And then SOAR, a more recent entrant into this space, but
everybody wants it.
But it, going back for probably 2 or 3 years now, maybe longer for some people, but in the last 2 or 3 years, all this stuff is hard, but what's going to make it better is I need SOAR now: security orchestration, automation, and response. And the orchestration, I don't know that we know that means, but automation, I like the sounds of that. It sounds like stuff's going to happen automatically.
Yep.
Or that, automation is good,
Yep. It's like Lucky Charms. It's just
magically delicious. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so now SOAR is the piece that everybody wants. And, further confusing thing, there are overlaps of.
And sometimes people try to put a SOAR in a SIM.
Yeah, correct.
Or
that they say that their SOAR product is a SIM product, or they say that their SIM product is a SOAR product, or kind of whatever. And I have some slides today.
So I think about this, and this may be one of the first things we say that upsets people.
Yeah.
I don't want to diminish the importance of a SIM, but to me, it's kind of just a data warehouse with some fancy analytics on top of it.
I mean, what is a SIM? If you go back into the old days of what was that SIM, it was a freaking database. It was an Oracle or SQL database that I stuffed logs in, log events.
Yeah, just collect all the junk in here, try to correlate it, do some security specific data analytics on top of it.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And it even differentiated, and in implementation, it was not too terribly different than dude, we've been doing log collection, one of the components that people think of as part of SIM, but log aggregation, pulling the logs together in one place. We've been doing that since before my time, which is to say,
since before you were knee high to a grasshopper,
for decades and decades.
Mm-hmm.
And so, nothing really actually magical about any of that stuff. And, everybody was built, on top of the same Oracle or SQL or.
Can you go into presentation mode on your guy there?
I can, yeah. There we go. And so a little bit about SIEM, an architectural view. I have all these systems. This is more of a systems view out here, but I have all these inputs. And so I pull in event data from different operating systems. So this could be, this service was stopped on this Microsoft Windows server, or applications. Bob logged into SAP. Devices, something came alive on the network, something has a new IP address, those sorts of things, databases.
It's all event driven.
Event driven. Every time like clockwork, that happens around the clock. And then there are contextual data inputs to SIEM. So specific vulnerability scans is a very specific thing, I could pull in, but user information just that I use to contextualize, like, okay, who is that username? Or maybe more importantly, what role that user that just logged into that database? Are they a database administrator? What's their role in the organization? Are they logged into the finance system? Or are they from a different department? Asset information, really kind of inventory to help us out here of, what location is that asset in? What purpose is it used for? And then threat intelligence information. If this machine is talking to this website on the internet, what do we know about that website? Is it a good normal website? Is it a known bad website? That sort of thing. I pull all that junk into this SIEM database, into one place, one database typically. And I have all this logic, all these rules. I do all this, stuff, and provides usually some sort of pane of glass where analysts can, where people can come and bow down and worship at the
altar of
the altar of the SIEM. Yeah.
Is this where we get all the laser beams from, like on a big screen?
On a pew pew chart.
Pew 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 pew.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I will say when people have these, weird pictures of like, what does a security place look like? The screen up on the wall was, with the pew pew maps of, here's the map of the world and different things popping up. Back in the day, the biggest, baddest SIEM product was probably the biggest, baddest one and the most expensive because it had the coolest pew pew maps.
And that's what people buy, our pew pew maps.
Correct. That looks really, really cool.
But nobody uses it for actual.
No, it doesn't accomplish anything.
No, it doesn't.
But again, this whole architecture, this whole view, SIEM at the center, and then there were, so there's like some of the 1.0 original SIEM vendors that I mentioned. And, in the last 5+ years, for a while, I don't hear this quite as much anymore, but people, you need a next gen SIEM.
Ooh.
Right. And so.
Got it. Is it 3 times as much money?
Yeah. And really similar-ish architecture, but some of the differences would be the addition of user, and then we had to add this other thing, user and entity behavior analytics. So maybe a little bit of machine learning or AI to say.
And I think that's pretty generous to call it
correct.
AI. And okay.
Well, and I would differentiate that from first gen SIEMs, because one of the dirty little secrets about SIEM is, myself included, everybody wanted to go buy one. Like, I can't deal with all these logs. I need to pull them together in one place, and then I'll be able to analyze them. And then you bought a SIEM, and what you discovered is that it's a big box of really complicated tinker toys.
Well, that's kind of, I'm going to press the pause button on you for real quick here. That's the thing I see people get like choked up on, is they see all of the pew pew maps and the concept of a SIEM, but they don't realize how much work and cost is going to be associated with it. Because I kind of see this like, I'm going to simplify your thing here, and you got to get the data in the SIEM.
Yeah.
you got to write rules to correlate all the data, because event data from an operating system and contextual data from a vuln scanner, completely different data taxonomies, right. And you got to map those. Then you got to do some kind of threat hunting, look for bad stuff in it, and then you got to alert someone. And I see people just get stuck at step one of get your data in the SIEM.
Yeah.
And so your diagram there is accurate, except most of the time what I've seen is it's just firewalls.
Yeah, correct.
And it's just a firewall logging into a SIEM. And then when they get the second thing, they're like, wait, you mean I need an engineer that just writes correlation rules, and then it all just burns down from
I need a guy who makes more than I do just
to write rules,
just to worship at the altar.
And then wait, that correlated data is pointless if I don't have some threat hunting capability on top of it.
Right. Well, and I'm going to simplify your simplification even more, which is to say buying a SIEM I view as very much akin to buying a database. Nobody in their right mind would buy a database and say, now I can track all of my factory production because I bought an Oracle database. It's the same way with SIEM. You buy a SIEM, you bought a big complicated bucket.
It's like you bought a car, and then when they delivered it, it was just a dump truck full of car parts.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Although there are some new ways coming out that I think might help.
Yeah. And so some of that, people bought SIEMs, and then I think if people really owned up to it, some large percentage of SIEMs are just glorified log aggregators and collect. It's a place I can go and
one of the most popular SIEMs literally started just as a data analytics platform.
Yeah.
Yes. That's we're like the magicians that show you how the magic's done.
Correct.
We're going to get in trouble for this.
And the piece that I will add is some of the next gen, what came with next gen, supposedly some machine learning or user behavior analytics. Maybe I built on top of a big data architecture instead of a database architecture. Still a bucket of logs, but the underlying,
just a better but more highly performant bucket of logs.
The underlying bucket is more interesting. Maybe I have a little bit of light automation, input and output, and it's a more it's not fundamentally better, or it's not so fundamentally different architecturally, but because it's built on newer technology, maybe it's SaaS hosted, maybe it's on top of big data. I'm not writing Perl scripts to, I'm not writing C code to move data back and forth. Maybe I'm using some modern technologies to do, querying and stuff like that. But probably the biggest thing that got people like, I need to abandon my old SIEM and move to next gen, again, if we're honest, is this promise of user behavior analytics, which is SIEM is really hard and I haven't figured out how to identify anything with it. No, really.
1 million false positive alerts every
Correct.
day.
And so a lot of people bought into, I'm going to do next gen because I think that behavior analytics, like that sounds like it's going to tell me automatically.
Extra whipped cream on top.
Yeah. Machine learning and AI, somehow it's going to know my logs better than I do. And it's going to use machine learning to figure out what bad is. And, again, if I sound jaded, it's because I've seen that doesn't work typically well. This I'll go through very quickly, but SOC, Security Operations Center, very, very few organizations, sort of got to this level. But, after I buy a SIEM, or maybe as I'm buying a SIEM, I realize that like this thing on its own does very little. And so not only do I need engineers to plug the ins and outs together and make it actually produce something actionable, I also need people on a daily basis. I found in smaller organizations, I put a SIEM in and the premise then becomes, well, system admins will use the SIEM to look at logs. And my experience of being a system admin and leading system admins, if you say you need to do this analysis, it'll be like Friday at 3 p.m. at the end of like, I don't have anything else to do. Maybe I'll look at some logs.
It's like checking for backup job failures.
Correct.
It's real high on the priority list.
Absolutely. The alternative is to go hire a tiered team of people who specialize in, again, daily, hourly are worshiping at the altar of the SIEM. And, I've run a very, very large SOC, and I've done it the other way too. I've, not had these folks, and, people who work in SOCs are very near and dear to my heart. What I'll say here is this is out of the reach of most organizations, because in this day and age, if you have a capability to do this, you probably need to do it around the clock.
Mm-hmm.
When you say
it's not like it's not. There's no point in just doing it 8 to 5.
Yeah, and just to kind of the math, the people alone just to monitor the logs around the clock and have 3 shifts. I mean, you're talking about 10 to 12 people who are pretty well-paid people, and that's not to do everything else in your security organization. That's just to monitor and analyze logs.
So is that why a lot of mid-size organizations go with, I think it's called MDR, Managed Detection and Response? So some of the SIEM stuff and some of the SOC stuff.
Yeah, and let me come back to that. Right now, What I'll just say is that this is out of the reach of most organizations that aren't a Fortune 500, if not Fortune 100 kind of company, or an equivalent, government entity or something along those lines.
If you have a security team of 2, this is probably not something you should
No, you're not going to go build a SOC. And it'd be folly to say, well, I'm going to hire a person and they'll be the starting point of congratulations. Your one person is, less than 10% of what you need to even, be doing this rudimentarily. I will say what a SOC does, what those people are doing is about event reduction. So in this day and age, you start with, at the top end of a funnel, all the logs in your organization, of which, big orders, you might have billions on a daily basis, and to turn those down into the, which trigger rules that we've configured, which are really interesting, which are probably bad, which am I going to have an analyst to look at, and then at the bottom of the funnel, which of those, of the billions of events, which of those turn into an actual security incident, which was,
and then that probably gets queued off to higher layers of the SOC to go investigate these things.
That's absolutely correct. Very, very rarely does that tier 1 SOC analyst sort of finish out. And so if you don't have the staff to do this, some mid-market organizations hire, it started with, they'd hire a managed security service provider, or even, something people call sometimes SOC as a service, and just say, I'll timeshare with other people and they'll pull my logs in.
But that's kind of level 1 SOC, right? Of like, we're going to take these and be like, we think badness happened. Somebody should go do something about
it.
They're not actually the doers of something.
Correct. That a managed SOC will typically, I'll send you all my logs and you'll send me back things that are interesting that I should look at. And could be a whole topic on that, but people have mixed results on all of that, is what I say.
That's a hard nut to crack.
Correct. And your security environment isn't just like everyone else's security environment. SOCs and SIEMs have to be tuned to your organization. And then finally, SOAR, all I'll say here is, a lot of ways we could talk about SOAR, but where I think about, if this was a SIEM diagram, I'd be pulling all this information in centrally to the SIEM. And a lot of the flow of SOAR kind of goes in the reverse direction. So typically in conjunction with a SIEM, maybe in conjunction with a SOC function, where I've taken all this information in and human beings go and say, this looks bad. What do I do about this? Oh, I should disable that person's password. I should reimage that computer. I should launch an investigation. I should block this website on a firewall. SOAR seeks to orchestrate and automate those things. So a typical kind of SOAR use case would be something like, this computer on my network is exhibiting behaviors that say it's been infected. It's likely been infected with malware, like all the signaling's there. the antivirus or endpoint EDR is providing this kind of signaling information that's consistent with malware. And it's and I tie that together with network communication that says it's talking to a malware command and control.
I feel like if you don't have all this fingerprinting from the SIEM side of things, if that's not like well tuned and well implemented, this might be a very difficult thing to
Correct. This is another thing that's sort of a surprise for a lot of people with SOAR. You go buy a SOAR and day one, do automate what? Like you have to know, and this is the unfortunate reality, like you have to have a human process that needs to be automated before you can automate it. And this doesn't just...
Automation doesn't define your processes for you.
No, correct. And so you need to know, well, what malware incidents might I have, and what does that automation look like uniquely in my organization? And that's, do I put a ticket into,
so let me see if I understand. So if you have a SOC and it's functioning well, they have maybe manual processes for responding to indicators of compromise, and it's just becoming very laborious. Like we have to do this 50 times a day.
Correct.
And that's well established. Then layering a SOAR on top of it to go automate some of that and reduce the labor is probably effective. If you don't have that capability, or back up one step, you don't even have an effective SIEM capability, this, even though it sounds magically delicious, probably isn't as simple as arrows connected to a circle in the middle.
And I'll describe it this way. The money in your organization that pays for a SOAR product typically is displaced out of SOC analyst expenses. And so I'm growing as an organization, and I threw out that minimum, excuse me, I threw out the minimum 10 to 12 people number. I brought on this other organization, and I'm going to buy SOAR instead of hiring 2 or 3 or 4 more analysts. And that's that'll give you a sense of what that probably is going to cost, because that's how it's, positioned. Or I had the 10 or 12 analysts, and, I'm going to cut back to 8 or 10 versus 10 or 12. And that will, pay for SOAR essentially. And that's where the SOAR money comes from.
That makes sense
in organizations. So the final piece that I'm going to talk about is, I say coming soon, but many of these things are here today. And this kind of gets to your like MDR or, kind of questions. And I think XDR kind of maybe.
We might do one just on XDR specifically.
Yeah, I think that would be a good topic.
Rebadging of a lot of this.
Yeah. And here's where I said up front that I probably need to apologize in advance. Having done it and tried, and not often with fantastic results, to put SIEM in small organizations. And then my experience of running SIEM, SOC, SOAR well in a very large, Fortune 50 organization. I saw where it fails and I saw where it succeeds. And for most organizations, especially mid-market organizations, I don't think you should be going down the SIEM-SOC-SOAR path. That isn't to say that there isn't some piece of it you might get some value out of. I'm just saying buying into I'm going to try to do what Fortune 50 companies do, except smaller, is just not going to work.
There's a minimum like gravity that you have to get to be successful.
Correct.
That critical mass is too big for most of the organizations out there.
Yeah, totally agree. And so some of the things, some of the reality of today of, along with my don't start down this path, and maybe what path to start down instead. First of all, recognize scarcity of talent. Like even if you could afford 10 people plus to do this, like the reality of obtaining, and that was a real challenge at that Fortune 50 company, always having, it's not just hiring the 10 to 12 people, which is hard enough. It's keeping them,
the turnover.
Correct. Because they're very attractive,
and very portable.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Also explosional, like our log traffic is just exploding inside of most organizations. So just even to keep up with what you have, much less the changing nature of security, gets harder and harder. Another thing that's disrupting things is a lot of these SIEM-SOC concepts are based on premise-based infrastructure, and everybody's stuff moving to cloud. Even just moving logs around, and like, do I want to be paying for data egress,
ingress, and long-term retention?
Stuff. Yep. Pushes us in different directions. And then here's the real thing, for mid-market kinds of, for moderately sized organizations, call it less than, 2, 3, 4 billion in revenue, that it's not necessarily SIEM or SOC, but the managed detection and response, or SOC as service organizations, but MDR, XDR in particular, may not fully offer a SOC or a SIEM, but they have what I would call SOC or SIEM light.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Very often it may not be a full-blown SIEM, but there's a portal I can go to and see my key logs and manage alerts. And then there are some other disruptors coming. All the cloud providers have some sort of strategy around this that I think increasingly, as many of our applications are there, to build this yourself, when it might just be a feature you turn on inside of organizations, both the log collection and then the alerting, and even some response around
the parsing of data. And
correct.
Yeah.
As well as, we wink, wink, nudge, nudge, talked about AI machine learning earlier, but actual, an actual AI machine learning organization like Google having a product like Chronicle to bring some actual artificial intelligence or machine.
And it's interesting when you dig into where they apply the artificial intelligence, it's not where everybody thinks it's at.
Right.
It's not in magical threat hunting. It's
right.
in that whole problem of correlating data into a single taxonomy.
Right.
And that's probably in the most powerful area you can apply it.
Okay. Well, good. I'm glad I got that all off of my chest.
Do you feel better now?
I feel some catharsis today, so that's good.
Well, I learned some things. I appreciate you taking me to school on this one.
Cool. Well, you didn't fight very hard, so we'll do this next time. Cool. All right. Until next time. You disappeared on me. I thought I offended you or something, but until next time.
All right. See you later, man.
Bye.